Are we ready?
Okay, yes, we are ready to go whenever you are.
All right. Today is June 2nd, 2021, and it is 7 o'clock. I am Mayor Rachel L. Smith, and I'm calling the Oregon City regular meeting to order. Ms. Riggs, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Morrow.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
And Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Here. All right, so item number 2 is the flag salute, which we have been abstaining from during virtual meetings. So I'll move on to number 3, that is in proclamations, commission appointments. There are also a couple of mayoral appointments I want to mention. I've appointed recently Sarah Peterson to the Citizen Involvement Committee. She's the Hillendale Neighborhood Association representative for the remainder of that 2-year term, ending at the end of this year. And then I've appointed Savannah Ovaldia. I probably said her name wrong, but her first name's Savannah. And I really enjoyed her interview on the Transportation Advisory Committee. She's appointed for the remainder of the 3-year term, ending December 31st, 2022. I'd like to also mention that we currently have some relatively new vacancies that we are currently accepting applications for. So we have the Historic Review Board now has a new vacancy. We're looking for someone from the McLaughlin Neighborhood representative. Parks and Rec Advisory Committee has a non-voting teen representative. So we'd still like to have teens participate. The Planning Commission, we also have a new vacancy on that commission, and that is an at-large representative. The term for that ends December 31st of 2024. And then we still need a Chamber of Commerce representative for the Transportation Advisory Committee. And so we will also have a number of our fall recruitment process starting in September, but for these recent vacancies, we are interested in filling those. So if you're interested in the Planning Commission, HRB, Parks and Rec, please, the Transportation Advisory Committee, please reach out to, look on our website and reach out to Ms. Riggs for information. Commissioner McGriff, did you have a question on those?
Yes, I did. I wasn't aware that we had, I thought the Planning Commission positions were just Planning Commission positions. I wasn't aware that we had an at-large position, at least from my service. I don't recall that.
I just put it as an at-large within the city because all the rest of them have actual representations on her sheet. So it was hard to distinguish between those.
Yeah, I thought Planning Commission was just citizens from the entire city.
Yeah.
I also wanted to thank you so much for the candidate that you talked about for Transportation Advisory Committee. I think it finally broke the block since Lisa Nor was on. There's a woman on it, on the TAC. So I'm like, yay!
Yes, and she's a young woman, and she interviewed really well. I thought she did, and I was very happy. Tech liked her as well, so that was an easy appointment to make.
Since I did get the question asked yesterday, this will be up on the website. Do we have a time frame of when we're accepting applications? Because the last batch, several people complained that they completely missed it, didn't see it. Are we getting the information out to our CIC friends, our neighborhoods, that we have these vacancies and that we want them by a certain date, get the word out?
Yeah, for the Planning Commission and the HRB, it will be a pretty quick turnaround because we would like to get someone, all of them, we would like to get them on as soon as possible, but specifically we're asking for about a 2-week turnaround. So I will send it out.
Yeah.
I will send it out.
CIC meets on Monday, so that would be something good for them to promote.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith.
All right, and then the other group of appointments was the commission appointments. Since we had Commissioner Morrow on board, It was a chance to reassess. Everybody got to kind of raise their hand for different committees, and we didn't do a ton of shifting around, but I will run through the list really quickly. So Beaver Creek Employment Area Blue Ribbon Committee, that is still Commissioner Frank O'Donnell. I'm not appointing anybody to the Brownfield Grant Committee because I believe that committee is over and done with, and it's not been meeting. CIC, heads up CIC, we've got to change. We're going to send Commissioner Adam Morrow your way to be the commission liaison. For the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, that's C4. I will continue to attend that. They're meeting tomorrow night. And the alternate is Commissioner Adam Morrow. The C4 subcommittee will continue to be myself. Clackamas County 205 Tolling Diversion Committee is going to be Commissioner Adam Morrow, with the alternate being Commissioner Frank O'Donnell. Clackamas Heritage Partners continues to be Commissioner Rocky Smith. Clackamas Water Environment Services Policy Committee continues to be Commissioner Rocky Smith. Downtown Oregon City Association Board continues to be Commissioner Denise McGriff. Impact, which is the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, continues to be myself. The alternate for that is Commissioner Denise McGriff. OC 2040 Project Advisory Team, there's 2 people on that team. That's Commissioner Adam Morrow and Commissioner Denise McGriff. The Willamette Falls Locks Commission is supposed to be the mayor. That will be myself if I ever get officially appointed. And Oregon City Tourism Stakeholders Group, there's 2 folks on that. That's Commissioner Frank O'Donnell and Commissioner Rocky Smith. Oregon City Westland Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge Concept Plan Project Advisory Committee, that's Commissioner Denise McGriff. South Fork Water Board will continue to be myself, Mayor, as per the South Fork Charter and bylaws, and then Commissioner Frank O'Donnell and Commissioner Rocky Smith will also continue on that. Willamette Falls Landings Heritage Area continues to be Commissioner Denise McGriff, and we now have an alternate of Commissioner Frank O'Donnell. And the last but not least, Willamette Falls Legacy Project Liaison, that will continue to be myself and Commissioner O'Donnell. And that is the long list of commission appointments. Those were all emailed out to you. I emailed the spreadsheet out to you all this afternoon, including Miss Katie Riggs. And so, congratulations.
I think Commissioner O'Donnell had an interesting look on his face when you gave him an assignment.
Well, the key word is alternate, so some of us won't be there at the same time.
Okay, so I think that's it for item number 3A, and we can move on to item 4, citizen comments. And I believe we have Ms. Karen Morey signed up to the public comment. Is she? I see you're on. Karen, if you're there, you can unmute, and looks like she's on the phone.
Yeah, so Karen, you'll have to press *6 to unmute yourself. There she goes.
Karen, are you with us? Karen Morey?
Yes, Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So you'll have 3 minutes. Can you state your name and city of residence for the record, and then you can begin. She went back muted. There she is.
I have done that multiple times.
Okay. You can go ahead. And she's back muted again. Karen, you're muted. Karen, if you're talking, we can't hear you. You'll need to unmute yourself. I'm not sure what is happening. I don't know if she's accidentally hitting the keys.
Yeah, sometimes I think the phone, when you're on the phone, it's a little tricky when you press the *6 and then it has like a delay. So if you do it more than once, it
Tried
mutes you
another
and then
#6.
there you
Did
go.
that work?
Yes.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. I tried #6 again. Denise says she can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Again, sorry, don't even start the timer. No, I'm touching nothing, Rachel.
She's clearly listening to the live stream. So
Oh,
just talk to us on your phone and ignore the live stream.
Pound or star? All right. All right. I'm Karen Morey. I'm speaking only for me. All right. I'm getting a delay here, so.
You need to turn the live stream off.
All right, let's try this. I'm Karen Morey from Oregon City. I'm speaking only for me tonight. Thank you to the Budget Committee, both citizen and commission members, for the supplemental budget item on the consent agenda. I appreciate the recognition that moving the upper yard, AKA Lower Waterboard Park, to the Parks Department moved the liability to parks, including existing structures that, although over 70 years old, were not designed for this lifespan or maintained for this longevity. But these structures are not the only problem. For my last few years compiling the history of the property, I personally think that adopting this property immediately as a charter park may create obstructions that were not intended in transitioning the property from an industrial use to a park, once funds are available for improvements. But I do repeat my personal thank you to all for understanding that moving a city property from one department to another can entail large costs depending on the state of the property. And this addresses the consent agenda. Done.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Morey. All right. I believe
Okay, I need.
already made a charter park. Isn't that correct? We've already approved it as a park. So, okay, just for the record, I just wanted to be, I thought so. All right. Any other citizen comments, Ms. Friggs?
Nope, no others.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to, there are no presentations. We'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda that we would need to adjust the regular agenda for? Commissioner McGriff?
Unless I've got the wrong agenda, I don't see the item on the consent agenda that Ms. Morey was talking about. Did I miss this somewhere?
She was referring to number 7B. There's a resolution. It's a supplemental budget.
Oh, the supplemental budget. Okay.
For the current biennium. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to adopt the supplemental budget, but I guess in response to her comment, I guess it was always my assumption that Public Works was going to take care of removal of those buildings and other things after they got all their stuff out, rather than having Parks take on that liability. So I guess I would have a concern knowing where Parks' budget is at the moment. Not that Public Works is rolling in the dough, but I think they have more of a capacity to help with that than Parks does.
So if we want to discuss the supplemental budget, if we want to discuss the supplemental budget, we should pull it from the consent agenda.
Well, that's the only thing I have a concern about. The rest of the budget's fine. So I guess if that's the way for me to discuss it, then I would recommend we pull 7B then.
Okay. All right, we'll pull 7B and it will be placed in Well, we said we would put it in general business, and unfortunately, that's going to put it right at the very end, but that's what we've said we will do. So anything else on the consent agenda from? No, seeing none.
Move we adopt the consent agenda.
Okay. There
I'll
is,
second. Second.
right. Thank you, Ms. Riggs.
Yes, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so we're going to move on then to item 8A. And this is a resolution regarding receiving state revenues. And Commissioner McGriff, can you lower your hand? And Mr. Conkle, is that you? Is this item for you? I guess I'll open the public hearing first. Sorry, I'm not following my notes. This is the public hearing, so I need to open the public hearing. It's now open. Is there a staff report?
Yes, thank you. The staff recommendation is to move to adopt resolution number 21-28, a resolution declaring Oregon City's election to receive state revenues. Oregon City is eligible to receive approximately $443,000 for 2021 and 2022 and $468,000 for 2022 and 2023 in state revenue sharing funds, liquor tax revenue. In order to receive the revenue, the city must have levied property taxes in the preceding year and pass a resolution approving participation in the program and file a copy of that resolution with the state prior to July 31 each year. Hold the following hearing on the use of state revenue sharing funds, a public hearing before the budget committee to discuss possible use of the funds, and a public hearing before the commission on the proposed use of the funds in relation to the entire budget, and certify the Oregon Department of Administrative Services no later than July 31 of each year.
All right, thank you, Mr. Conkle. I think I can, well, I do not have any public comment, public testimony on this hearing. I'd like to confirm with Ms. Riggs. That's
Yeah,
true?
no public testimony on this one. Thank you.
All right, in that case, I will close the public hearing and we can deliberate this item. I will say my only discrepancy on this item was the staff report says that it says that the requirements are that we discuss the use of these funds, and I emailed Matt Zook about this, like, tell me where I can find specifically these items in the budget document, and he provided a page, and that essentially that these shared funds are essentially wrapped up in larger buckets of money of the general fund, and therefore they're generally talked about. And so I would just maybe call to question on that in future budget hearings, if this is a requirement for us, if we need to fully call out these state revenue sharing funds as a discussion of the use of those funds. I just want to make sure that we're checking all the appropriate boxes from the state and not kind of doing a broad brush kind of stroke of that. That was my only concern, maybe for going forward, but nothing that I would hold up this now. So Commissioner McGriff.
Oops, sorry. No, I didn't have any concerns about the city's election to receive the state revenues. And when we're ready, I would like to move that we adopt the resolution.
Okay, there's a motion on the table.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Riggs, will you call the roll, please? Or do we need Ms.
Yes.
Riggs?
No, this is
Oh,
a
okay.
resolution.
Okay, we're good.
And did you officially close the public hearing?
I have.
Did.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure. So Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so we'll move on to public hearing 8B. This is a resolution regarding our 21-23 biennium budget. This is a public hearing, and it looks like we do have some public testimony. So I'm going to open the public hearing and look to staff. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. The Budget Committee approved a total budget of $235,204,653 and a general fund operating property tax rate of $4.4090 per 1,000 of assessed value for both fiscal years 2021, 22 and 22, 23. Adoption of this resolution adopts the budget.
So I'm going to open the public hearing and look to staff. Can you please
Katie,
mute
can
Ms.
you mute
Maury?
everybody, please?
Thanks.
Let's see. Adoption of this resolution adopts the budget, makes appropriations, imposes taxes, and categorizes taxes for the 2021-2023 biennium. On May 3rd, 2021 and May 6th, the Budget Committee reviewed the proposed budget. And on May 6th, the committee approved a total budget of $235,204,653. The Budget Committee discussed several additional topics to be taken up by the Commission before adopting the budget. These included $20,000 to resolve outstanding charter park issues, potentially $100,000 to upgrade the city's website, a potential reduction of $300,000 transfer from general fund to the library fund, an addition of $350,000 to address the restroom facilities at the cemetery, the total amount of discretionary funds, and the total cost of resources being applied to address homelessness, just not the new amount. In the staff report under the background, we did outline the discretionary funds from the general fund totaling approximately $2.7 million, addressing the commission's goals that have been identified and outlined. We've also, the general fund contingency could be reduced below the amounts recommended to allow for the 2 months operating costs and a 10% emergency fund. An additional unbudgeted source of revenue for the general fund could include FEMA grant reimbursement for the city's ice storm expenditures, which was not budgeted due to the uncertainty of approval from the federal government. The FEMA grant reimbursement and emergency declaration has subsequently been approved, and the general fund is reasonably expected to receive between $400,000 and $600,000 at some point in the next biennium. Finally, the amount of funds allocated to address homelessness in the next biennium budget is at a minimum $800,000. This includes the homeless liaison officer, a behavioral health specialist, a homeless program expenses. In addition, other police officers, code enforcement, parks workers, staff, and the new library safety officer all contributed and are not included in the $800,000 identified above to address homelessness in Oregon City. Staff is requesting one change to the approved budget: the elimination of a limited duration building inspector to be replaced by the addition of a permanent full-time building inspector. Due to additional projects coming in that we did not expect to occur, as well as anticipated retirement coming up, we are requesting that change. As you recall, the building department, the building fund, is essentially a dedicated fund. It does not receive general fund revenues, and it did have a sufficient ending fund balance that the transfer from the change from a limited duration to a full-time building inspector would not have a detrimental impact on that budget in any way. I believe that was pretty quick. I know there were a couple items in there that the commission did want to discuss that were outlined with a little more specificity and a little more thorough in the staff report, but I'll go ahead and conclude there, and then we can help assist with any discussion that the commission may need assistance with.
All right, thank you, Mr. Conkle. So I believe we have some public testimony. David Goldberg. Thought I saw him. There he is.
Yes, hello, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is David Goldberg in Oregon City. I'm the new chair of the library board, and I'm here to speak about the library budget, and particularly this item of potential reduction of $300,000 that was brought to you as part of the report that was just read. As a new chair, I came to the director to see what the trend line of funding has been from the city to the library over the last 5 years. And frankly, I was kind of astonished, even before getting into this additional point of an additional reduction. For the last 5 years, and you've got some written testimony and also a spreadsheet that outlines this in some detail. The library service population increased 5.41%. The utilization of the library in terms of circulation in the same period increased by 29%. Inflation went up by 12.5%. And yet the funding, that is the general fund transfer from the general fund to the library fund, offset by allocated costs, decreased over that period almost 50%, 46.68%. The new budget for the coming biennium posits another decrease of 53.89%, or over the 5-year period, more than a 70% decrease in city funding of the library. This was a great surprise to me, and it was something that I really wanted to bring up to be sure that when you are aware of this trend, and secondly, that this be considered as part of a correction to the present proposed budget, and certainly to address this issue of the additional $300,000 of the biennium that somebody raised to reduce the city funding. So that's the point of my testimony. And as I said, the detail is in the written comments that I've submitted. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Goldberg. Ms. Riggs, did we have anybody else sign up for public testimony?
Yes, we do have Karen Morey again wanted to speak on this item. So Karen, if you could press *6 and unmute yourself.
Okay, am I back on?
Yes.
Hello? Yes. Okay, there's like a 30-second delay between YouTube and the phone. That's what I'm running into here.
Yep.
All right, so am I clear?
Yes.
Okay, this is Karen Morey, Oregon City. Again, speaking only for me. For several years, I have compiled a history of the Oregon City Library and have served on the Library District Budget Committee since the district was passed overwhelmingly by voters. Oregon City was the first circulating library in the Oregon Territory and made several attempts at public libraries from the 1840s until 1910, supported by well-to-do residents and a small subscription charge. Finally, on December 5th, 1910, Oregon City voters approved a rate of 1/2 mil, also known as 50 cents per $1,000, to support a public library for the first time. This tax base, plus a donation of what is now known as Library Park, gained us the funds from Carnegie to build our library long after many other cities in the state. By 1950, staff and patrons complained the building was too small. In the meantime, city budgets cut back on support of the library, resulting in limited hours, limited services, and a move to a commercial space to try to provide room for the ever-growing number of users. The County Library District passed in 2008, providing funds for operations only, keeping libraries in the county open for enough days and hours to provide services, and set aside a one-time fund for construction or expansion. It took Oregon City until 2013 to identify a site for our expansion on the existing property and took until 2016 to open the newly expanded library. 60 years after the need was identified. With fluctuations in city financing for operations before 2008, it was difficult to build a savings fund for a new facility, and the new building was funded mostly through bonds. The city now proposes reducing the library funding request while passing through ever-increasing charges for services from other departments and charging bond service to the library budget, which is reminiscent of what we've gone through in the past. With another hat, I really, really want to recommend the library safety officer as a touch point for outreach to our unhoused. I spent 32 years as a parole and probation officer. I know what skills are needed. Library staff can get additional training, but it's not their job. And I think the city is doing a wonderful job for networking with our unhoused to try to connect them to services. And the library is a prime place to make a one-on-one connection with the unhoused, particularly families, but also singles and couples, and to get to know them and try to help them with referrals to options. And in closing, I think you lose more by reducing the library budget than you gain. I would ask you to not pass this reduction. The end.
Great, thanks, Ms. Maury. Yes, she was on my list, and I missed that item 8B. Apologies, Katie. I don't believe we have any others. We did receive, I believe, an additional public comment via email this afternoon. And so just calling it to your attention to make sure that you all saw that. I think it was from the Oregon City Library Foundation. With no other further public testimony, I will close the public hearing. And then we can begin our deliberation, questions for staff, modification discussions for the budget. So I'll look to commissioners. Who wants to start? Or if everybody's good with the budget, you can make a motion. I think we have adjustments to make though. Commissioner Smith.
So I'll just kind of talk about the areas that I'm concerned about. I don't have any interest in changing the budget as far as the library is concerned. So I would recommend us staying with the original plan of the budget for the library. I do, on the list of things that came up on our last meeting in terms of the charter parks, I think the charter park issue is a priority. And I think most of us agree on that. I do have an interest in trying to deal with the restrooms at the cemetery. And I guess in the other piece is the website, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but is not a top priority for me in comparison with the other items. And I still have concerns with the urban renewal expenses for in the city budget. But that's it.
Okay, Mr. Conkle, with the addition of the FEMA dollars that you mentioned, I think it was 400 to 500,000, I believe is what you said. Is that considered general fund dollars that could be used to tackle some of these outstanding items if we have general consensus?
Yes, we believe that we had significantly more in terms of expenditures in response to the ice storm, and those have been tracked and allocated back to the departments that the expenditures would have come from. For example, transportation or parks via general fund or stormwater. But when we break out those costs and allocate them back appropriately, especially to the utilities, since those are dedicated funding sources because of the utility rates that pay into them, we believe that we would have that $400,000 to $600,000 in that was expended by parks, which is essentially then general fund money available, which we did not include as a revenue nor an expenditure in the budget before you, because at the time we created the budget and we had the budget committee, there was still no emergency declaration at the federal level. And we needed that federal declaration in order to be comfortable that we were at least going to be eligible for some type of reimbursement.
Okay. I think that's pretty helpful. Maybe some procedural advice from somebody, Tony or Carrie. We have a couple of items here, and I'm trying to figure out what's the best method to try to get consensus on amendments to the budget and prep for a motion, because I think we're going to have some motion with amendments. Do you have any recommendation there?
I think we could, and Carrie or Matt, if you'd like to chime in, I think we could take them one by one, if that would be easier. 20,000 for the charter. Yes or no? Katie, I don't know, or Carrie, I'm sorry. Do you have a different opinion or?
My only suggestion was maybe you ought to hear from everybody to see where the common areas are. I think that might be a little more efficient. I mean, I'm happy for you to go item by item, but I think if you hear from everybody, then maybe we can make notes and basket things together.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fine. I just kind of wanted to get some guidance on what you thought was best ways to move forward. So I see Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm sorry, Mayor, could I just ask Matt one question real quick?
Sure.
If we are going to look at the inclusion of the FEMA money. Now, the hard part of the FEMA money is we don't exactly know when that reimbursement might occur. I think it's going to be a while, but just knowing that we're going to get it, is a benefit. So Matt, I don't know if it's better to include it now or include it once we receive it.
I would recommend we include it when we receive it. And that would make tonight a little bit simpler. We could also do a supplemental budget at the time that it's received for the exact amount we know we're going to get. That way we're not coming back multiple times to the well and taking up time here. So that would be my recommendation.
And I guess I just say that because we are actually still incurring expenses related to that event. So we're not gonna be able to give you an exact number. We can give you an estimate tonight, but until we know exactly what our total expenditures are, of which we are still making them and will continue to make them for the next couple of months, we're not gonna have a final number. So I guess I do agree with Matt, just realizing that we will reduce the amount of ending fund balance as was proposed in order to accommodate if there are additions made, such as the website or the bathrooms, and not offset somewhere else.
Okay. That sounds good. Mr. Zook, did you have something else that you need to add?
Well, I just wanted to add to your question about procedure on the resolution. Ultimately, you have to approve a resolution. So I would get consensus on the different issues. And then when it's time to approve the resolution, we'll speak those changes into the resolution. We'll have to articulate that separately because the resolution as presented right now is based on the approved budget. So none of the changes that are on your list are included in that. So we have the flexibility to speak those in to the resolution, but let's do that in one vote, basically.
Yeah,
my recommendation.
Sounds good. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yeah, I'll follow the format we agreed, and I'll actually use Mr. Zook's report and go through it one by one. I don't care how we handle the money. I'll make this comment. I mean, it's either accounts receivable or it's cash on hand. And if you want to be more comfortable when you have the money in hand, that's fine with me. As far as going through these items one by one, I definitely support the $20,000 to resolve outstanding charter park issues. The $100,000 to upgrade the city's website. I don't know if I'm qualified to speak to the amount. I agree with upgrading it as far as making it more user-friendly, more navigable, to be able to get to the answers you seek. I just don't know if it's a $100,000 bill to do it. So in my mind, it's an up to $100,000 set aside. The one I struggle with, and I'm a fan of the library in every way, and I'm a big user of it, and my grandchildren and my wife and I are big users of it. But when we ask for what does the $300,000 represent in terms of what does that get us, what programs would suffer, what will we have to reduce, we got 6 pages of stuff that you could get lost in and not say this is what you would lose if we lost this 300,000. So that's still on the table with me, as unpopular as that might make me or this proposal. But I would have liked to have seen a more definitive answer that says this is what that buys. And I understand you can commingle money. If I have this 300,000 here, then I can use this. I get all that, but I really would have liked to have seen the response that says this is exactly what this gets, and we didn't get that. The restroom facilities, I'm pretty passionate about that. I actually went down there to look at it, and with the assistance of a staffer, that is an 8x12 cinder block building, which is the best part of it is the cinder blocks. But quite honestly, it's not ADA accessible. It's not, it goes beyond that. There's no ramp to get you in there, but even if you got in there, there's no way a person in a wheelchair could use those facilities. It is small, it is cramped. The men's room, the urinal has been torn out of it. There's a single stall. It's so narrow, you couldn't get a wheelchair in there. The women's room is in disrepair and suffers the same size constraints. I just feel that it's a park for us. It's a place where people go to honor their dead. It's people go to for solitude. Many of those are going to be aged and infirmed. We owe it to this community to fix that, and whatever it takes. I don't know if it'll take 350,000, but that again, that's a set aside to get it done. The answer was given us to the discretionary funds, so I have no question about that, and I do acknowledge at least a recital of what homelessness resources this community is truly throwing at it, because it was important for the people in this community to know. And in fact, it sounds understated because in some cases, it sounded like we weren't even applying the homeless liaison officer or the library position to that. And those are a direct response to those conditions. So I feel we're responding properly in those things. And I think that would conclude what I have to say. I believe I've addressed everything that Mr. Zook listed on his list. Thanks.
All right, Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, Tony actually answered my question, but I am more comfortable with the recommendation of staff to wait until we actually get the money in hand to determine how much it is and then deal with a supplemental budget. I think I'm more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I have not had a chance to go down and see firsthand the condition of the restrooms at the cemetery. But I will say this, that I was at the VFW Hall on Memorial Day visiting with some of the members and had by the way, had a fantastic lunch. And I did hear several comments with regard to the bathrooms. And as I stated last time, I've forgotten that we actually had bathrooms there. But so based on Commissioner O'Donnell's description, I think I can forego the site visit and rely on his discretion about the condition of it. I think that if that supplemental money coming in from FEMA, we could use some of that, that would probably be appropriate. I concur with Rocky on the issues to resolve the charter park. I do not support a reduction in the library fund. I feel that the information that we received from the library director and then the supplemental information was more than adequate. And I will quote a statement that I said last time, that the library is a city asset. It is owned by the city of Oregon City. It is not owned by the library district. And in my opinion, the money, the minor amount of money that we have put into this is basically what I would call our skin in the game. We own it. We need to maintain it. We took the very extraordinary step of having the property listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And I feel that that is just a feather in our cap for a building that is very unique. We are award winning. I mean, I could go on and on and on about all the fabulous things about the library, and I'm very passionate about it. I participated from the ground up on that addition. My family has been active users at the library until my son moved away. We were there all the time in the splash pool, in the library, in the children's section, all over that. And I still continue to go myself. So I think that we derive a significant benefit from that library. And we are inviting our library district patrons and friends to come in and enjoy something that is ours. And it is very near and dear to my heart. I would definitely say that I would agree with Frank on the idea about the website. As much as I know about it, I do find it sometimes difficult to navigate. I want to ask a specific question, particularly on the GIS map, and I'm telling you, I can't get the answer that I want. So I don't know what that number is, but maybe we need to look at that from the standpoint of what needs to be made more user friendly by talking to users of that site to say, what do you find helpful? What do you find not helpful? And how could we get to making it more friendly? As I stated before, I love the city of Portland's things called Portland Maps. You put in an address, you get everything you need to know about a piece of property. And I wish that we could navigate to something like that. So you find out the zoning, you find out whether it's got utilities, you find out everything you need to know about. It's all in one little place instead of having to navigate around. Because have you ever tried to look up the zoning map on your computer? No, doesn't work very well unless you have one of those giant flat screen TVs that you could see the whole city. So I will just stop there from that standpoint, and we can move on to one of our other fantastic commissioners.
All right, Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, with the issue of the library, I am not comfortable taking away that funding. As someone who has grown up benefiting from that amenity, I do not think it would be in our best interest to do that, especially at a time like this when the library is operating as much more than just a library. And with all these great new developments like the Library of Things, I just don't think that this is the time to do that. And as far as the other line items that we were talking about, I'm in support of all of them, but I would like to highlight the issue of the website as someone who was most recently on this commission, someone looking on the outside looking in. And I will say that even though I am a young person, it was pretty hard for me to find the things I wanted to find. I found it to be pretty unintuitive. And I think that as we get out of the pandemic and hopefully return to in-person things, people are still going to be utilizing these digital activities that we now realize are accessible to us. And so I think that makes this issue even more important. And I will concur with Commissioners O'Donnell and McGriff about the cost, because when I first heard the 100,000, that kind of gave me pause. But again, I don't have any experience in that realm, so I don't know where to make that judgment as far as the cost goes. But I think that should be something that we
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Morrow. All right, so I will do like you all. I've been keeping a tally of wherever everybody's at, so I'll step through all of that again. Charter Park, I'm in agreement with that. The restrooms, I'm agreeing with that being a priority. For the website, the only thing I don't like about our new system is I can't search previous meetings by a keyword because I was trying to find the IT strategic plan that was presented to us, which is where this whole idea of the city's website came up initially. We talked about it in a work session. We went through it. It was one of the high recommendations from staff about the website. And so, but I couldn't find it really quickly at my fingertips. I do support that as well as being an update. To me, the 100,000 seems high. I think for me, it's a placeholder, and we can do an RFP and talk about what the scope of that website refresh. It sounds like from what I remember of the IT strategic plan was that the staff, the managers, and everybody that was interviewed to support the IT strategic plan had lots of input on that. And so I'm sure we could come up with a scope and a RFP, and then we'll see what proposals we get. But a safe placeholder, I don't have any problems with putting a safe placeholder in there. The library is an interesting one. I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell. I don't think our intent was ever to say, no, we don't support the library. I think the issue was that, and I still have the issue, the same as Commissioner O'Donnell, is that it is still not clear where the $300,000 is being spent on. I got 6 pages of justification of why we needed to give general fund to the library. But if I were to ask you right now, what is that general fund dollars going to be spent on? I would like a very straightforward answer. And it doesn't feel like we get one. I feel like it just gets mixed in with all of the other library dollars. And as pinpointed as we went through this budget, that answer would have not been acceptable in any other department that we asked very specific questions on of what is that line item. And so I really just feel like Commissioner O'Donnell and myself are just holding that same consistent accountability across all of our departments, that when you have $300 or you have a line item, we just want to know what it is. And I read the document from Mr. Williams. I'll agree with Commissioner O'Donnell. I still felt a little puzzled, like I didn't get a straight answer. I felt like I got a lot of justification, but still not a straight answer. So I'm going to leave it at that because I do support the library. But I'm just trying to be really clear about where the issue is. And the library is doing very fine in funds. When you look at their budget, it's a healthy budget. And so when we're looking at not being able to fix restrooms or something like that, we're looking at every penny, and it matters. And so that's why we were kind of holding the feet to the fire of Mr. Williams. If you'll remember, we did that to our building codes person, and he's never received that many questions about building codes and his finances. So we did it to everybody. And so we're just being consistent in our review of the budget. So I think in general, we have consensus on all of those items. The couple of things that I had marked in the budget about the homeless strategy, I get it that we're providing staff, behavioral health specialists, the homeless liaison, and all of that. My only concern was that we were going to formalize our plan by the end of this calendar year is to have an internal strategy. And then we'll move on from that and work on partnerships and prioritizing, like coming up with things that we can move forward to continue to move the needle on the dial. And it concerns me when other things in the budget have placeholder items, like the 100,000 we just talked about the website. We have other things in there where we don't have a full program laid out, and we've got 100,000 set aside. This was an area that I felt like we were teeing up a strategy and then potentially letting it fall flat of saying, well, we're going to rely on everybody else to provide more services. And I just felt like perhaps there should be a city contribution. The flip side of that argument I'm well aware of is that the city's providing contributions by providing our homeless liaison officer and the behavioral health specialist. I guess I will let this item lie until maybe the end of this calendar year, because I'm anxious to see what strategies we come back with, and maybe when we're revisiting supplemental budgets and updating our budgets and stuff, if there's any low-hanging fruit, I would like for this commission to still consider how we can continue to move the needle on the dial on the homelessness issue. I'm hoping that that strategy will give us some good direction, because the amounts that I'm hearing from the community on homelessness, they do not want us to let up at all on this topic. On the housing goal, we have $30,000 on housing options. This is another one of the goals that I still feel like, in this one in particular, I feel like we're woefully underfunding, as it's a critical need for the city. And so I just want to voice my concerns about leaving this item or this goal. To me, again, it's taking a year to work on or to try to come up with housing strategies. Maybe there's some grant. I think there's potentially some other grant opportunities we can consider for. My issue with the item that's there is it seems to be really reliant on public engagement. And I think that may be an area where we should be hiring a consultant to help us evaluate housing strategies. Somebody that's a professional that could help us step through all of those and supplement our existing resources if we don't have the staff to properly do this item. So that's an item that I would like to return to maybe at a later time. And then finally, we've talked about this one, the amount that we set aside for the tribal memorial to honor the Cayuse 5. It's a pretty hefty amount. I think we pulled that line item out of thin air. So I would support reducing that item if we feel like we've overspent the FEMA dollars and we need to make some adjustments. $150,000 is a lot of money. So, I still want to do it and I'm completely all in. We have no cost estimates. So if we were robbing Peter to pay Paul and we need to shift some money, that may be an area I was thinking potentially lowering it to 75,000. And I guess I would be looking to staff after all of that and knowing that we all kind of support the charter park, restrooms, website, and the library. Do we need to make any other budget concessions in order to make all of this work?
I don't believe so. I guess I'd just like to confirm too, we had proposed in the staff report converting the temporary building position to a full-time building position. That wasn't line itemed out. I guess I didn't hear a whole lot of opposition to that one. And then, we did look at the costs associated with the monumentation that's part of the Malala project that's currently ongoing. So that number, I guess I just want, it's
is it realistic?
Pretty close.
Okay.
I hope it's lower. And we will do everything we can to do that. It's just, from what we're seeing for costs to put in installations, in the public sector, it's probably in a close ballpark.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I would just speak to comment on a number of things you said, Madam Mayor. On the housing strategies and homelessness issues, I actually agree with you that we should earmark some funds, whether those funds are for, housing or whether they're for grant writers or something. How do we make sure that we avail ourselves of opportunities, especially funding opportunities that extend out beyond our city limits? And do we have the staffing capacity to stay on top of that right now and get those dollars? So I wouldn't have any trouble earmarking some monies to potentially, if we had to hire consultants, that the payback would be we participate in these county or state dollars that we otherwise wouldn't. I've got no issue with maybe earmarking some monies for that if needed. Pursuing funds and grant writing it's always a question of how much capacity do we have internally to do these things. So I don't disagree with you on that. The Cayuse 5 thing, I thought 150,000 was a big number too. And I I don't know what to say about that. If it's a placeholder, okay, it seems elaborate, but again, Mr. Conkle just stated that he's surveyed the cost, and at some point you have to defer to your management team. So that's where it stands. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner McGriff.
Well, I haven't had a chance to put up my agree with Frank sign yet, so I'm getting worried.
Throw it away.
No, I can't do that. I like the thoughts that I've heard about the line item we have involving houselessness, homelessness. But being a person that likes to lay a foundation for things, I would like to get a little better handle on the beginning part of our strategy. I support that. I think we need to have a framework to proceed. We need to have a roadmap to proceed. And I guess I'm not comfortable with earmarking funds for something that I don't know where we're going yet with it. I mean, I have an idea, but that may not be the idea. So I guess I would say, hold on that. We have an opportunity to do a supplemental budget if we need to do that, once we figure out kind of the direction that we're going to go in. So I would be more comfortable with that.
Yeah, I guess, Commissioner O'Donnell, before I let you go, I guess my issue is that on goal 5, we have implement the tourism strategy, and I recognize that's transient room tax, and it's a lot of money. And then the next line item is where we are earmarking $100,000, and we have no program, and we're not even sure how we're going to determine the city's role in supporting community events and other amenities that support tourism. And to me, if we're supporting tourism already with a $700,000 line item, I question why we're holding an additional $100,000 for a program that has yet to be developed. And so I feel like there's some similarities there. And so I just would like equal parity across our goals. If we're going to be holding $100,000 here and $100,000 here, I think our community would think housing and homelessness deserve a $100,000 placeholder. That was my only.
What about splitting it? I know that the tourism strategy there's a framework that is being worked on, that is going to be coming. It has not been vetted yet by the group, but it's been worked on. I don't know how much amount of money that would be, but if you have concerns about the earmark 50,000 of that to your suggestion. And if we make adjustments later.
I think what we're trying to do is make a statement with the earmarking. Other than that, I mean, let us not forget, and Mr. Zook can correct me, there's a substantial amount of money that's under the category of discretionary funding that we could potentially use as we see fit in the future. So I think I don't want to take from one department I don't want to move those monies around. I just want to be aware that, unless I misunderstand, we do have discretionary funds if we choose to pursue something in some future time period.
Yes, I believe you're correct. That $100,000 I'm referencing as general fund, so it can be moved around to wherever. Commissioner Smith.
I was just going to make a comment about the tourism and what money, if it's transient room tax, obviously it can't.
Right. No, I'm not talking about that one. It's the line item right below that in our list of projects.
I think as part of what Ms. Turway was proposing as it related to looking at the homeless strategy, as well as implementing the House bill requirements that the legislature passed, was a discussion about potential revenue sources to pay for that. I think one thing that we've brought updates to historically, but we've never come to a final decision to implement one way or the other, was the ability to collect the construction excise tax that directly goes to housing projects. So I think, whether we allocate something now from general fund, or do we wait and have a discussion once we see what the options or strategy or tools available to us may be, that would include looking at, essentially generating a revenue source that's dedicated, much like the transient room tax, directly to an issue that we're seeing, specifically being affordable housing, was some of the thought process that we put into putting together what we recommended. We had proposed, because of trying to make sure that we hit our 2 months of operating expenditures plus our 10% emergency fund, plus meeting the goals of the commission and working within keeping the tax rate at the existing rate for the next 2 years. It was, okay, how can we fit all these pieces together to make that happen? And that's why the request on, for example, affordable housing was so less, because we're going to do that internally to see what that strategy comes with. And maybe out of that comes a discussion of, okay, well, we're going to reprioritize general fund revenues, or we're going to look at a new revenue source, or a combination thereof, or neither. So just a little bit of how we were trying to put the puzzle together in the proposal.
Okay, I guess that line item is pretty heavy on public engagement, and I just don't know how much the public are going to be able to provide input on housing strategies. So if the staff are doing work on that item that's not really listed in that line item, then my recommendation was that it looked like perhaps staff wasn't available, and therefore we might need a consultant to help us through that. And so that's why I was thinking maybe some money for a consultant to help that. But if you feel like staff and you got that covered pretty well, then we can let it lie.
I think initially when we were trying to also do the tree inventory and the citywide housing inventory, we were starting to get a little concerned about staffing availability. And then once we rolled those two projects out of the goals, we were comfortable that with the existing staffing levels, we could meet those, the remaining goals. If those other two were in there, we were very concerned about the ability to deliver.
Okay. And then the last thing I'll say is I'm looking at the timeline. I appreciate the estimated timeline that you've provided on when these projects will take place. The housing one is taking place toward the second year, the final year of the biennium. So there's a delay there. And so obviously that work, I don't think will come out of that in this next biennium with necessarily maybe housing strategies to implement. The homeless one is different though. That strategy is slated to be done by this December. And it just concerns me that we'll have a strategy to address homelessness and how to move forward by December. And we have maybe a whole year and a half to, with no additional funds targeted. So I'm happy to circle back on that item whenever we have the strategy complete. And if there's a budget request, we can circle back then at that time. Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a commitment, not only to the commission, but to you, and the fact that I think that as we start this strategy, we will probably have some idea of what direction we're going to go in. And I have no problem with us revisiting, making a commitment to take a look at where funds are coming from, because a lot of grants, you have to have some money to get some money. So I will make that pledge. So it's an important issue to me, but I definitely want to have a roadmap so that when we explain this to our constituents, we can say, here's where we think we're going. We've got your input. We're going to go there.
Yeah, that's the other thing. This conversation is, these two items or topics you're probably going to get asked about. And, so as a city commissioner, I get asked on these two all the time. So hopefully with this conversation, you'll have some answers to give and not just, we're not doing anything about them. I can tell you our citizenry will not find that an acceptable answer with the homeless situation and the housing prices that are escalating at a very rapid rate. So hopefully this conversation has at least been helpful for you all when talking and receiving comments, as I imagine we probably will continue. Is there a motion? I think we've got general consensus. If I need to run through those, I can. but we were all paying attention, so we probably all know. Is there a motion?
Yes, I was trying to get in the information that Mr. Zook had, so you were suggesting that we add in these items to the motion? Is that that's what I wrote down, but I just want to clarify.
Yeah, the resolution that you're going to approve to adopt the budget and levy the tax does not reflect what you've just discussed. So whether you take a motion in advance of approving the resolution or simply have a discussion with a consensus as to what changes you will make in the resolution, 50-50, however you want to do it. But when you go to approve the resolution, any changes you want made in that budget, other than what's presented there, needs to be spoken into the resolution.
So as part of the resolution, we would propose to, if I heard correctly, we're going to propose to add $20,000 to address the charter parks. We're going to add $100,000 to address the website. We're going to add $350,000 to address the bathroom at the cemetery. I think those were the additions, as well as changing the building temporary employee to a full-time employee. I think those the four changes I believe we had consensus on.
I heard up to. I didn't.
Well, we don't put up twos in the budget.
Up to 100,000. I know. I'm just saying. I'm repeating what Commissioner O'Donnell said, that he has no problem with it as long as it's not in excess of that. Okay. Well, I guess I would move to adoption of Resolution 21-29, adopting the budget, making appropriations, imposing taxes, and categorizing taxes for 2021, 2023 biennium, with the addition of the four items as we discussed. $20,000 for charter park, up to $100,000 for the website, $350,000 for the bathroom. And which one am I leaving out here?
The conversion of the building, a temporary employee to a full-time employee.
Conversion of the employee from the building department from a temporary employee to a permanent employee.
Second.
Matt, do you have something?
Yeah, I just need some clarification.
Did I leave something out?
No, I do need some clarification on whether or not we are offsetting some of these expenses with a reduction of other goals or recognition of the FEMA grant, or are we simply taking it from general fund contingency at this point?
It was recognition with the FEMA money.
Well, hold on. I think that what I heard was we were going to wait and bring back a supplemental budget once we know what the FEMA reimbursement is. So this will come from the general fund, and we're not going to offset this with any reductions anywhere else in the budget. I believe that's where we were at.
Yes.
Well, I mean, my intent is that we would come back with a supplemental budget to adjust it for the FEMA money.
Correct. Once we know what that is.
We will.
Yep.
So the motion for today is, in absence of FEMA money, we know that we're reducing our contingency in the general fund to make the changes as stated. And that's what we have to build into the motion today, because I have to be very clear on sending this resolution to the people that care to levy the tax.
So I need to add, reduce the contingency.
That would be helpful.
Okay, okay. So Katie, you can make it, you can fix it, wordsmith it. So yes, I'm adding that. Adam, are you okay with the second?
Yeah, I will re-second that.
So we'll be reducing the general fund contingency to offset the cost increases associated with the general fund.
Yeah.
Increases.
As well as the cost for the billing fund change as well.
Employee, yes.
Yes. We can work with that verbiage as long as the city attorney is comfortable with us speaking that in and making the changes later. I've got enough instruction and direction to implement.
I don't think there's going to be any sneaking.
All right, so I think we've clarified the motion that's on the table, and the motion has been seconded and approved by the seconder. I think we're ready for a vote. Ms. Reagan.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
No.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Let's see, where are we at? All right, we are on 8C. This is another public hearing regarding the adoption of findings and modified conditions of approval for two separate appeals. Files HR 1-0001 through 21-0005 for 5 cottage homes in the Kenema National Register. I do need to open the public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing and remind everybody that the record is closed. We closed that record at a previous meeting, and turn it over to Ms. Richter to address ex parte contacts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just like we did last time, I need to poll the commission to see if there have been any ex parte contacts since the last meeting, May 19th.
Do you want to go through, or do you want me to call on each one?
No, I think if anybody has had any, they could volunteer them. Now would be the time.
Only speak up. And
None.
all right, seeing nobody else, I think we're good.
I think you can proceed. Thank you.
All right, so Ms. Turway, do you have a staff report for us?
Kelly Reed, planner with the city, can summarize the changes for you.
Kelly, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Can't hear you yet. Don't you love IT and technical difficulties?
It's my favorite.
You might have to check your Zoom settings. Check your.
While she's getting connected to audio, I can just summarize them for you real quick. So the findings are identified in the agenda. They uphold HRB's decision to require replacement of textured siding, modified condition for basalt rock facing on the 5-foot retaining wall adjacent to house 1, a modified condition to require removal of visible skylights on houses 2, 4, and 5. And lastly, a modified condition to require replacement of all windows on all 5 houses. Yes. We are here to answer any questions that you have.
My sound is working now, I think.
There you go. Yep.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So Laura went over the general overview. Do you have anything else to add, Ms. Reed?
Yes, well, I have the additional conditions that the commission decided on last hearing. If you all would like me to show that language on the screen, I'm happy to do that. But it's in their staff report already.
Denise, I don't know if your thumbs up meant yes, show us, or you're good.
Thumbs up where no, don't show us.
All right, so I think we don't have any testimony because we have closed the record. So I believe I can close the public hearing for questions and deliberation. Ms. Richter will stop me if I'm incorrect, I think. So I'm gonna close the public hearing. And then now we can have deliberation and questions for staff. So Commissioner O'Donnell, I believe you had your hand raised.
No, it was to say I don't need any further information. It's in the staff report, and Ms. Turway summarized it, so we know the issues.
All right. I thought that the findings in the staff report did a good job of characterizing where we landed in general consensus. I think this was a tough one for us as a body, and Where we landed was just general consensus across the board. There's definitely pieces in here that I know that certain commissioners didn't agree with everything, but we do things by consensus, and that was where we landed. So your vote tonight is, to me, it's signifying that that's where we landed as a body, and approving the findings as written and provided to us. I think we do have the opportunity to revisit these items if you guys really want to do that, but otherwise, I don't think we do, but now's your chance. Commissioner McGriff. If not, we can have a motion.
If you're ready for one, I would be willing to make one.
Yes.
Okay, I would move adoption of AP 2102, AP 2103 with the findings as specified in the staff report. Is that enough, Carrie? Do I need to say anything more?
I would have referenced the planning file numbers rather than the appeal numbers. But
Right.
I think it's fine. That the point is you're making a motion to approve.
I can do that.
Planning files GLUA 20001, 21, HR 21001 through 21-0005 for 5 cottage homes in the Kenema National Register District, based on the findings provided with modified conditions of approval.
Commissioner McGriff, do you accept that modified emotion language?
That's a lot longer. I was just going to do the file numbers, but yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Smith has seconded the motion. Ms. Do you need to make some statements? Commissioner McGriff?
I just wanted to agree with your statement that this was a difficult application. I've not really faced anything like this during my career. And I don't look at it as, I take this very seriously. Oregon City's history is very important to all of us. And I think we have, as was so aptly stated in the report, that we have obligations. We want to work with people, and this in no way it indicates that we are anti-development in any way, but we have requirements, we have things that we need to follow, and that is what we are suggesting. So I again don't take any pleasure in this, but we were kind of put in an awkward position. So thank you for the commission's indulgence in getting through all this.
All right, seeing no other hands raised. Ms. Richter, do you need to make comments for the rector, or we can go ahead and take the roll call vote?
Go ahead and take the vote.
All right, Ms. Briggs.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so we're at 8:30. Commissioner McGriff, is there a desire to take a 5-minute break?
I was just going to ask you if we could have a 5-minute break, please.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Let's come back. Come back at 8:35. We'll take 5 minutes. All right, so it looks like we have everybody. So yep, double checking, we're all here. So I'm gonna call the meeting back to order. We're a 5-minute recess and we're ready to move on to item 8D, which is the first reading of ordinance number 21-1009. This is also a public hearing. So I have been opening the public hearing first, but it looks like we can have the staff report. I don't know if it matters. Yeah, we can go ahead and have the staff report. Since nobody's chiming in on if I'm doing it wrong. So Ms. Turway, would you like to kick us off for 8D?
All right, these are proposed amendments to our annexation code in Title 14, and staff had worked with the City Commission at the end of last year and the beginning of this year to come up with some draft changes. And after some limited public engagement, staff assembled a legislative application to actually adopt those changes. Pete Walter, Senior Planner, is here to go through a summary of those changes for you.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners. My PowerPoint is brief this evening. I'm primarily going to focus on the Planning Commission's suggestions, and I'll give you a brief background on what the work is that we've all done today. So successful annexations have to demonstrate a positive balance of factors in our code, and they are quite discretionary. And what we're attempting to do is to provide greater specificity. Up before you on the screen is the timeline showing when we held the work sessions. We did a public notice on April the 20th. It was not on May 5th. It was April the 20th. So that's a typo. And then on Planning Commission held the first evidentiary public hearing on May 10th. And here we are with the first reading of the ordinance. Next slide, please. So the goal of these amendments is to provide greater clarity and specificity to the factors, which are the approval criteria for annexations. And the purpose of that is so that we can provide a better analysis of the infrastructure needs prior to development and get a very clear idea at the time of annexation what types of infrastructure and how this area is going to be served according to our comprehensive plan and public facilities master plans. So I'm not going to go into detail because you've heard a lot of this before, with perhaps the exception of Commissioner Morrow. And I do want to introduce some of the amendments that were suggested by the Planning Commission. Next slide, please. So Planning Commission recommended approval of all of the changes that City Commission worked on, and they made a few suggestions for changes to 4 of the factors. Those are factors 6B, 8, 10, and 11. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on each of those. Next slide. They also recommended that in the application requirements, which are the part of the code that specifies the documentation and analysis that is required, that the statement of availability with respect to services and public services such as water, sewer, drainage, and transportation, parks, and schools also include wireless communications infrastructure, since that's something that may have been overlooked in the past and certainly is something that we can look at through contacting the agencies and quasi-public utilities that provide those services. Next slide, please. So back onto the factors. Factor 6B is one of 3 sub-factors that are intended to show whether the annexation is in the best interest of the city. And Planning Commission recommended that factor 6B, the sub-factor that addresses land needs, be amended to include the terms jobs and or housing, and suggested that the City Commission could weigh this factor on its own, or perhaps even weigh it more heavily than the other factors 6A or 6C, if the land to be annexed and includes significant jobs and or housing. Next slide, please. Natural hazards include landslides, and so the Planning Commission said that we should include that phrase, and so we have. And that's a fairly straightforward amendment. Item 10 and 11. So this is a little trickier. So factors 10 or 11 are concerned with adverse impacts to the economic, social, and physical environment of the community, and also on specially designated open space and scenic, historic, or natural resource areas. So Planning Commission talked about these 2 factors and their differences and similarities, and they found the language somewhat confusing. They recommended that we try to combine these factors in some manner while adding some specificity about what the terms identified and designated mean. So staff has attempted to provide a suitable combination of those factors for your consideration by making reference to the comprehensive plan where resources like this are identified. We can also provide greater specificity. And we also added the terms that any significant adverse impacts on either these environment or on these designated resources can be avoided or mitigated through policies that the city already has, overlay district zoning, or some other method that is worked out during the annexation review process through conditions of approval, including master planning, which is something that we're already requiring. So that is the suggestion, to combine and clarify those. And then if those are combined together, we have to renumber the following annexation factor, which next slide, which is currently factor 12. And that is the factor that concerns significant site grading or tree removal that might occur following application for annexation. So there's no recommendations from the Planning Commission to change this factor. There were some comments on it, pro and con, from members of the Planning Commission that are discussed in your staff report in a little more detail. But I'm not going to go into more detail on what they said about that factor. So next slide. So the final recommendation is that City Commission approve the first reading of the ordinance approving LEG 2101 with the changes recommended by the Planning Commission. And with that, next slide. Happy to answer any questions or comments you have.
And we did receive some public comment today regarding this issue. Peter, Carrie, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we received a letter from the HBA, the Home Builders Association.
All right, so before we take any questions or anything, I wasn't actually following my own notes, and I do need to open the public hearing. So I would like to open the public hearing at this time. And we do have public comment on this item. Go back to asking questions to staff, but I'd like to hear public comment. We have Roseanne Johnson from HBA, who did submit written comments this afternoon around 5 o'clock. I will say I did not have a chance to read them, submitted that late in the day. But Ms. Roseanne Johnson is here to speak with us. So I see you're on the call. Let's make sure we have audio with you, Roseanne.
Hello, good evening. This is Roseanne Johnson with the Home Builders Association. Could everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So you'll have 3 minutes, and if you can just state your name and city for the record.
Sure. My name is Roseanne Johnson, and I currently reside in Portland, Oregon. So tonight you have the first reading of the Annexation Code amendments, and as you may recall, HBA has been concerned for some time as these were being developed that with the discretionary nature of them, some of which was already in the code and some of which were proposed with some of the amendments. And so a couple things I just want to highlight based on the letter that HBA submitted today and based on previous testimony as well is that first of all, we feel strongly that the city should be in alignment with state law regarding annexation and therefore officially remove the policy on the annexation information webpage that the city has talking about or outlining annexation process and remove the wording having to do with waiting for the Court of Appeals ruling on the issue regarding Senate Bill 1573 and basically remove any wording that has to do with voter approved annexation as a default. Of course, there will be still times that voter approved annexation would occur, but not under the qualifying standards per the Senate bill any longer. So that's the first request. And then the second request is that the city take a look at any of the discretionary or subjective standards in the annexation code that specifically have to do with housing and the regulation of housing. HBA feels that annexation code for parcels or territory that's currently in unincorporated Clackamas County that has a comprehensive plan designation that is residential in nature is in effect the regulation of the development of housing. And so per Oregon Revised Statute 197.307 parentheses 4, that regulation of that territory and therefore the regulation of future housing on that territory should only be subject to clear and objective standards. So really, HBA wants to encourage the city to take a relook at any of the subjective or discretionary standards and provide either an additional or a revised clear path that is only clear and objective for those territories that are subject to the regulation of the development of housing per the state statute. So with that, I will end my testimony and thank you for the opportunity to weigh in with the development stakeholder group that your building official and planning and engineering staff convene bi-monthly as well as with previous public testimony. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Katie, do we have any other additional public comment? Just want to make sure.
We do not have any other public comment for this item. Thank you.
Public testimony, I should say. All right, so in that case, I would like to close the public hearing and we can then deliberate and ask questions. I know that I think it might be easier to step through each one of the proposals from the Planning Commission. I know I have a couple of questions on them and maybe stepping through and asking if anybody has questions on each one may be the easiest way to make sure we're good. Pete, can you put up that slide starting with your
yeah, Katie, can you pull that up again? Thank you. So go to.
So the 6B was the first one.
Yeah, before we get to 6B.
Or actually before that, it was this one on the wireless communication. So I did have a question on this one. I'm interested in knowing why they felt like this should be, it almost sounds like this should be a criteria, like would it be a criteria if we include it in there for weighing an annexation?
Well, this is a list of application requirements, but it does refer to the annexation factors in 060. We don't have a specific factor related to wireless communications infrastructure. If you wanted to add wireless communications infrastructure into the factors, I think the logical place to add it would be in item 6B, which is the land needs being in best interest of the city. So that's something that you can do. And then
I guess I just feel like we're talking about the availability, capacity, and status of kind of critical infrastructure when you're talking about water, sewer, transportation.
Right.
It makes sense to me. Adding in wireless communications when you're talking about on the fringe of an urban area, are you talking about whether or not they have cell service? Is that, is there a cell provider in the area? Is that?
They were talking about broadband communications. I used the term wireless communications because it was broader, and that's how we referred to it in the city code as well. But I'm no expert on this type of infrastructure, except for not every service that's listed here is a city service, and that would be, school facilities, for example. Or in some cases, water is provided by Clackamas River Water, and we acknowledge that. Wireless communications provided by, one of the many wireless companies out there. So to the extent that those types of infrastructure are something that the city is concerned about, it's a factor that you could choose to weigh or not weigh. Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any questions on this item? Commissioner McGriff.
Thank you. I think I understand why they want to put it in here. I think the having all the kids everybody taking school meetings and whatnot home is, we've overloaded the system. And I think, as some of you recall, that Mr. Graham actually asked to add this to the economic development strategy, dealing with wireless communications, having us look at possibly helping to facilitate citywide broadband. And we're relying on it more and more. And obviously we can tell that some areas of our city are sorely lacking of that service, where, when I'm in the hilltop, I have my calls dropped all the time. Sometimes I can't look stuff up. It's just, we need to be thinking about that. Not only, I think it will help facilitate job growth if we have that looked at. So, the thing that I see in this is not all the land that we're looking at it's not all about residential. It's about land in general that we might annex, that this would be a valued added item.
Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, surprisingly, I actually agree with Commissioner McGriff as far as as an attribute that has value, especially in the development of commercial property. I see it, but I hesitate to place it in the same category as critical services, which is what you recited, Mayor, whether it be sewer, water, police protection. It's almost something that would be looked upon favorably. I'm not sure whether to elevate. I can't elevate it to critical services, but I understand its value, especially from an economic development perspective. Done.
Okay. I guess we're talking about narrative statements. So this is in the section where they would just essentially just be describing the general current status of the piece of property that's under consideration, right? So just kind of, giving here's the lay of the land kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no more hands, maybe we can move on to the next one. So it's 6B, yeah. So it looks like, so they added the word 2 or more. Was it 1 or more before? Is that what the city commission had?
City commission, I believe, made it 2 or more.
So what's the,
So they didn't recommend changing that to 1 or more, but they did want you to consider item 6B. I think there were 1 or 2 commissioners that, maybe felt it should just go back to 1 or more, and that 6B be considered pretty heavily if it includes housing, land, or jobs, which obviously would apply to just about any larger annexation area that is going to redevelop, whether it's commercial or residential, but it's a factor and you could choose to include it or weigh it or not.
okay, Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, I want us to keep in the 2 or more. I would like to do a little wordsmithing. I would like the words jobs first before housing, because we can get all the housing we need, but we also have talked very strongly about the fact that we need to improve the situation of jobs if we're talking about having people not commute, add to the transportation system, overloading it with all this inter-county commuting. So it's a minor change, and I still think 2 or more is reasonable.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Once again, I'll agree with that. We talked about the focus on providing jobs, not becoming a bedroom community, alleviating the load that involves commuting if you don't have jobs in your community. And I do want to stay with the 2 or more. It's interesting how we characterize these things. We characterize them as discretionary and others characterize them as subjective. They are discretionary within the bounds of what we're establishing here. So I think what Mr. Walter has put forward is well stated, and I think it's got clarity and specificity, and it talks about infrastructure, and it is clear and objective. But again, it does involve some discretion. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't necessarily saying we should change it. I just wanted to make sure we had clarity on what the planning commission change was, since the 2 was highlighted and also the including housing is also highlighted. So it was just for clarity's sake. Okay, so I guess my question is, as long as we don't feel like those, as long as you do not feel like adding those words are narrowing what it means to meet urban needs, then I guess I would be okay with that. But I could think of some other needs that is kind of related to jobs. But if there was, I'll make something up, like a home daycare, for example, if they were being annexed in and the plan was to provide that service. I don't know that it wouldn't have a big tick on either one of those, housing or jobs. And but that's an urban need. And so I guess I just want to make sure we're not narrowing that line item B too much.
Yeah, I don't think we are.
I guess I would agree with you in the sense that if there's a component like that, it's an ancillary use that would go with something else, I think would help make the case even better if someone wanted to add that in. I know we've talked about, and Commissioner O'Donnell has expressed his interest in looking at bringing in employers who might be able to provide full service, and daycare could be one of those services that they offer not only to their own employees, but if they had capacity, offer it to others in the vicinity. And I've seen that in their jurisdictions, and the parents think it's a godsend. So,
okay, seeing no hands, maybe we can move on to the next item. I don't have any questions or anything on this one. This one's pretty
I
straightforward.
don't either. I think the comment about mapped and unmapped, because sometimes there is awareness out there about something that may have gotten missed. And it's always good to bring that to the attention. I think I would also apply that to the next one where we talk about only identified in the comp plan. There are things that are potentially eligible as natural resources or open space or scenic. There's a potential for those to be included. And I know when we're doing federal 106 review, you know, could it potentially be designated? And that's something that I think needs to be added.
Okay,
So
we should
Pete-
look at the next slide.
Yeah, go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Katie's advancing the slides. So yeah, this is the one that Commissioner McGriff was talking about.
So, okay, I'll let you look at that and discuss it.
Did you understand that, what I was trying to say, Pete?
Yeah, I think so. You know, there's potentially eligible resources out there that may not be identified in our comprehensive plan. They might be identified by the State Historic Preservation Office or some other inventory that we're not yet aware of until we actually review the annexation.
Were we talking specifically about our comp plan? Because I know that there are some things in the county comp plan that apply to the Trimble Creek area that are not in their comp plan, but we discovered it. And obviously those were significant resources.
Right. So we could say city or county if you wish.
What about identified inventories that are part of the Goal 5 process that may not, like I said, we've got potentially eligible Goal 5 resources out there, and I'm talking about all the goals. Those are all Goal 5 resources.
Excuse me, Commissioner McGriff, wouldn't that concern be covered by the first clause? Impacts on the economic, social, and physical environment of the community?
Sure. So if we're talking about the SEMEE, then yes.
So if there's a riparian corridor that's either on the county's plan or not on the county's plan, wouldn't that fall within that physical environment of the community umbrella?
Well, I think so. I just want to make sure that that's what that means.
Well, I think that's what the intent was, that that the sky's the limit on economic, social, and physical environmental impacts.
Okay. All
I
right.
would agree with that.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was hoping that that's what it said, and I was reading into it. That's what it said without elaborating. So if that covers it, then my concern about potentially eligible Goal 5 resources would be covered under that.
What is the commission's feeling about combining the two factors?
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm in agreement with this as written. I think as we just discussed and interpreted, I think it accomplishes what we wanted it to accomplish. The next question on combining, I have to review before I speak.
So I just want to make sure we're sure that adding the language can be avoided or mitigated isn't adding a requirement that isn't required. Does that make sense?
I would say that whenever we write findings for annexation, we're making reference to existing city codes and policies that are going to be brought into effect and have the impact of avoiding or mitigating these adverse impacts. If those policies and codes do not do that, then there would be, you also have the discretion to add conditions of approval that deal with what our codes or policies do not, provided that the significant adverse impact has been identified. So.
So I feel like what you just said makes it sound like we need to keep some language in there about them being identified and ideally avoided or mitigated. Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. So I'm going to just use a made up thing. So let's say that we get a piece of property that has a stream corridor through it, that we find out maybe it has a riparian corridor, it has fish habitat, or could potentially have fish habitat, and the proposal is to mitigate it and move it. Now, I don't know if that's a mitigation. That's kind of extreme, but it could possibly happen. I mean, when you've got stuff like that, you start changing the environment like that, and then there are other unintended consequences. So I think that, if it could be mitigated by using it as open space, or mitigated by, incorporating it into the development or whatever it is, that to me would be more of a mitigation than moving it or changing it. As we all know what happens when streams get changed and other things happen, unintended consequences. I think of Rose Road, where a lot of that water that was going through there got diverted. Well, now it's on other people's property that they didn't anticipate.
Mhm.
So now they have flooding where there should have been no flooding if the stream corridor had been left. But somebody decided, well, I don't want that going on my property. So they diverted it, and it caused unintended consequences to someone else.
So does this section, because we're taking IBs, it's hard for me to see the full section of how this is being applied. So is this saying that they have to tell us how these items will be avoided or how they're proposing to be mitigated, versus just identifying them for us to then consider what our, you see what I mean?
I think that the idea here is that the applicant will say, we can mitigate the impacts of development near this stream by providing a riparian corridor at 25 feet, and that's what that is possible. I mean, this is all about sort of feasibility at a very conceptual stage of development. It's very high level. And so I think it's not that we're evaluating whether or not scientifically this mitigation will work, but we have sort of teased out what the elements are, and that it is feasible to mitigate or avoid impacts to those elements.
Okay. I guess by stating whether or not they can be avoided or mitigate is also identifying them, so we don't have to be explicit about the word identify. So maybe it's a twofer. We can just assume, right? So, all right, I see thumbs up from Commissioner McGriff. I think, okay, so we want to move on. I think your next slide is your combine, right? Is your example of combining them?
Right. So there are no further recommendations for changes. This would just be renumbered.
Oh, that's renumbering. So it would remove, so the previous slide, sorry, Katie, you could go back. The previous slide, just to make sure we're clear. So that number 11 essentially goes away, and what right there is the combined new language.
Right.
So we're all clear. I think Commissioner O'Donnell, you could see the full thing. Okay. All right. So I think that's through everything. The recommended changes from the Planning Commission. If there's no other questions for staff, we can consider a motion. Ms. Richter.
I just wanted to offer one comment with respect to the home builders. I know that that this question of clear and objective standards has come up, and we did include some findings dealing with this with respect to goal 10, but we did not include any language about clear and objective, the statute 197307 sub 4. So what I would propose, if you are ready to proceed with the first reading tonight, is that happen, and then I will add some additional sentences in the findings for the second reading that will be adopted with the second reading, just so that I'll close the loop there. the commission needs to be aware that if this case were to be challenged, this would be the first annexation criteria changes post Senate Bill 1573 case. The cases that I cited in the findings are very early LUBA cases that 1573 wasn't around. What we have going for us is the language of the Court of Appeals decision with respect to Senate Bill 1573 that seemed to say that annexation has a political component and it has a land use component, and that is different than approving an application for housing under the clear and objective housing standards. So I just want to point out that this is not without risk, but I feel fairly comfortable with these findings that that these annexation criteria would survive a challenge.
So, but you feel like you need to add some additional clarity?
I would just like the findings that I've put in here now just deal with goal 10 because I didn't have the home builders letter with respect to the statute. So I'd just like to add some additional sentences into page 13 and 14 of the findings, but I don't think that changes moving forward with the first reading on the ordinance tonight.
I gotcha. And while we're on the home builders, the other request about removing the language on our website, I brought that up before. And at that time, the consensus from the commission was that we wanted to get our new annexation language through the process, and then we would remove that. So that we would feel more comfortable removing it because we had reviewed our annexation criteria in the review process. So I'm hoping that the commission will stand by what they generally agreed to. I think when we originally talked about this, maybe 6 months ago, when this first came up. So we can revisit that. That was my understanding, that we were kind of waiting on this item to get passed. All right. So with that, is there a motion? Everybody's getting sleepy.
All right, I guess I'll move the adoption of the findings for ordinance number 21-1009, Annexation Code Amendments, Title 14, Chapter 1404, and Legislative File 21-0001, with the addition of the findings as specified by our city attorney.
Seconded.
Just a clarification for item 6B, you had changed the order of jobs and housing in that factor. I can reread the factor if you want, but just those
No,
two.
that's just switch them. That's fine.
So the motion was seconded by O'Donnell.
And do you agree with that amended motion?
Yes. Okay. With the transposition of jobs and housing, yes.
Yes. All right, Ms. Richter.
Thank you. Ordinance number 21-1009, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending Oregon City Municipal Code, OCMC Title 14, Annexations, Chapter 14.04, City Boundary Changes and Extension of Services.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. So we made it through our public hearings. We're on to general business, and we had pulled an item from the consent agenda. So we're going to take that item up now. That's 7B. This was a resolution regarding the supplemental budget for the 2019-21 biennium. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I just wanted to get a better understanding from Mr. Zook about what the financial implication of this, I believe it's, what is it, $229,017 is going to have an effect on the parks budget ability to absorb that. I guess I was reading your description under number 1. So I understand that. What my concern mainly is that the full maintenance cost of dealing with Waterboard Park at this time is probably not, in my opinion, is a little bit more than what parks can probably handle at the moment. And I'm hoping that there will be some joint efforts between Parks and Public Works that they could work together on helping clear the site or whatever needs to happen to clean it up. And, you know, there's a lot of sort of interesting loose equipment up there laying around that I look at that and I think, well, what is that for? And what is that for? And so I just have to go up there with Mr. Lewis and he can educate me. So that was my concern. I'm just looking for an answer.
Yeah, I'd have to defer to John Lewis regarding what is up there left. I honestly don't know.
No, it's about the allocation going from one department to the other department.
Yeah, the amount that's in the supplemental budget now was essentially would not cover any additional cleanup or remediation or whatever that is. I'm not aware of what that cost was. It hasn't been presented to staff to finance as an item. So I hear your concern about who bears that cost, and I think that's a good concern. I don't know the amount of what's left of there, so I have to defer John or Tony on that one.
Well, I mean, the direction was to transfer it to Parks and make it a charter park. Public Works will be off the property when First Street is completed and they have the time to move the materials that are there out. There was never a discussion about making the utilities pay for removing buildings or any of that when this all transpired. I think that's going to be a cost associated with the redevelopment of the property as a park.
I agree. And that we talked about possibly having a master plan or some sort of plan to talk about how we deal with that. So if this is just a matter of transferring land from one place to the other and there's a small cost to it, then I'm okay with it. The discussion about all the other stuff to me will come later. Is that correct, Tony?
That's where we're at. Yes, this is to square up the costs of transferring the property and repaying the utilities.
Okay, all right, then I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Not seeing any more comments. We need a motion on the resolution.
I would move adoption of resolution 21-30 supplemental budget for 2019-21 biennium. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Ms. Riggs, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. So we are down to item 10, which is communications. Mr. Conkle, do you have anything for us tonight?
I do not, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
All right. City commissioners.
I really don't want to hear a crack from Frank, but it's okay.
All right. So seeing none.
I do.
You do, Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, thank you. I do. I believe that I sent an email to all of you regarding our resolution 20-19, and again, Mr. Morrow wasn't available at that time, but he's aware of it. And I would like us to go on record reaffirming this particular resolution, declaring Oregon City's stance against racism, discrimination, and social injustice as per that resolution, just to reinforce and let our community know that we are paying attention and that we are aware and that we completely support this, and just basically reiterating our support for this and the path that we're taking to deal with the items in all of our whereases. So that is my request.
I guess for clarity's sake, Can you be more specific about your request? I think in general, we all support the resolution. Is there a more specific request or just you're muted still?
Yes, I'm just wanting the community to know that we stand by this resolution. We have not wavered from our position with regard to this resolution, and it fully expresses our concerns about different things that are going on nationwide, countywide, or in the city. I don't want to be specific about any events because I think it's just rather generic. And I pulled it out a few days ago and reread it. And again, it affirms everything that we've talked about. And I just want the community to know that we are not wavering from this particular stance. As I stated, the resolution declaring our stance against racism, discrimination, and social injustice in our country and our community.
All right, thank you, Commissioner McGriff. All right, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'll move on to my communication. So it's been super busy, and I've received just a pile of email. And over the course of the last 2 weeks since our last meeting, I feel like it's hard for me to know how much you all are receiving and how much you're not getting, but at the same time, I feel like you all should know how much I'm hearing from the community about specific items. So I started creating a little log that I could report back to you all so that you know what I'm hearing from the community, because I think it's important that you do know. And so I'm just going to run down really quickly a list and numbers of received on topics so that you know that it's most of these are not one, some of them aren't just one item. So this is all within the last 2 weeks. A request to open the Pioneer Center, to reopen the Pioneer Center for our elderly folks. Some concerns about the Holmes Lane development. There were 4 of those. 3 concerns about the homeless problem in Oregon City. I also have a conversation going on with Jerry Herman to clean up homeless camp debris behind the Metro Transfer Station, which is also next to the Union Pacific Railroad. So we've got a little conversation and project going on that to get that area cleaned up. I received one request for an official statement regarding the protests and rallies in Oregon City. I received 6 concerns about Antifa coming to Oregon City. I had a meeting with OCU Sports to discuss the need for more sports fields and the fact that they are turning away kids for their baseball program due to a lack of fields. So we talked about that and possibly partnering with the county about just sports fields and sports complexes. I met with a group of electeds to discuss the I-205 projects and the House bills that are moving in the legislature. I forgot to mention the last time we all attended the Tyrone S. Woods Park dedication on May 15th. That one is not in the last 2 weeks, but we didn't mention it publicly. And I think we all really enjoyed that dedication, and I wanted to mention it here. I think it was a real highlight for our city. The video of that park dedication, you can find that online. Reach out if you want it and you can't find the video, but probably the highlight of my year. So I think the city did an exceptional job of pulling off that event. I know you put a lot of work into it, and it showed. It went off flawlessly. And I know our community, I received a lot of input on that it just made our community shine and look good, honoring Tyrone S. Woods. And so I really appreciate staff's work on that. I received 2 comments about the banner placement on Malala Avenue. We had a request for an additional debris drop-off. You know how we were having debris drop-offs from the ice storm cleanup. There's some concerns still hanging out there that there's piles hanging around and people still need to have a place to drop off. So there was a request to consider that one more time. And then of course, one concern about trees again, and the city needing an arborist. So anyway, that's just a little recap. I know city commissioners, I know you've received some of those, but it's been a busy time. And so I think it's important that you know some of the communications and what I'm hearing. And I know you're talking to folks that you hear from, and I know that we listen. I'm listening to you. I'm conveying what you're telling to me, to the other city commissioners. I think it's important. So with that, I will close. And my internet connection is unstable, so probably a good time to close.
Mayor Lyle Smith, I did not get any response from commissioners about my request. So if you don't want to reaffirm resolution 1920, I would like to, 2019, I would like to hear about it. I've also gotten emails regarding everything on your list, except you didn't have trash in Oregon City, trash pickups in Oregon City. That's was on my list.
Yeah.
The only person I heard from was Commissioner Morrow, and he supports us reaffirming it. I don't know about Commissioner Smith or Commissioner O'Donnell.
Commissioner Smith.
Hold on a second. I guess I don't object to it. I don't necessarily know what the reasoning would be to reaffirm it that we already affirmed. I guess I could understand if it was because we have a different configuration of the commission or something like that, and we want to. I guess I don't know what the reasoning would be to reinstate something we've already done, and
that's one of them. And all the incidents that Mayor Lyle Smith mentioned that I didn't want to get specific about. The incident at Metro, the incident at Clackamas High School, the incident at 213 and Beaver Creek Road. Just letting people know that we are supportive of an open community. I have no problem with people protesting or people doing stuff, but they need to do it peacefully. That's the reason.
Well, and luckily we have had peaceful events in Oregon.
Yes. And I wanted to give Commissioner Morrow an opportunity to weigh in on it as well, since he wasn't here. And if we reaffirm it, he's included. I wanted to be inclusive about that as well.
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, quite honestly, if Commissioner Morrow wants to state his support for it as the newest member, I've got no objection to that. I don't understand why we'd have to reaffirm it upon any event that happens. We've made our statement. That's our belief. I know the events that Commissioner stated, most of those were outside the purview of Oregon City. I don't know if we need to react every time and reaffirm what we've already stated. So I just feel we've stated our position. That is our position. It remains unchanged. I don't know why we would need to restate it, unless I certainly have no objection to the newest member saying I agree with that which we previously did. So that's how I feel.
All right, so I think we're all making the rounds tonight of reaffirming our commitment to the resolution. And Commissioner Morrow, here's your chance. We're going to put you on the spotlight.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think there's confusion all around. I was responding to Commissioner McGriff's email that she sent out, I believe, last Wednesday, requesting individual responses from us that we reaffirm it. And I was not under the impression that we were doing it in this sort of setting. I just figured it was more of an individual check-in. But I will say that I do support that. And as the second person of color on this commission, and in light of recent events, I have no objection to that, but I think there has been confusion. But if Commissioner McGriff wants to move forward with a more official reaffirmation, I would not be opposed to that.
Your statement is fine. You've added your name to ours, and the public will see this. Those that are going to watch it, we've made a statement. So I'm satisfied that we are now all in agreement. Not that I thought we weren't in agreement, but again, responding to half a dozen constituents, and also from this last Saturday while I was sitting in Library Park, had several people come up and ask me about this.
Commissioner Smith.
And in light of that and adding upon it, I will also like to wish everyone a happy Pride Month in Oregon City. And also let people know it is the last week of school, so watch out for kids next week. They're going to be out and about. So
We need to watch out for you as well.
That's true. Yeah, and teachers, watch out for teachers. They're ready to get out and they're ready to go. Yeah, have fun. So be careful.
Yeah. All right. So good communications there at the end. And with that, we're going to close our meeting at 9:30. So this meeting's adjourned. Thanks all.